Hey, and welcome to this super nerdy video on how you can fix your AKAI APC 40 Mark II. If you have one of these, you may have come across the phenomenon that these launch buttons don't work properly anymore, or that lights are flickering, or of course the crossfaders or the faders wear out. So today on this device, I'm going to be fixing one fader that's not working properly. So this is actually my backup device, but I wanted to show it to you when it's still put together. So in order to do this, what you're going to need is the replacement parts. I ordered these, this is a crossfader, the black one, this is the normal faders. I ordered these from InMusic, which is the owner of AKAI and its distributor, I think worldwide, but in any case, they have an office here in Europe. So I was able to get these pieces. They still have these in stock. So if you have these issues, reach out to them or the dealer that represents AKAI in your city. You're going to need quite a bit of tech nerdery in order to pull this repair off. So obviously screwdrivers and all that stuff. I'm using specific ones that are for electrical stuff that are a little bit finer than these massive ones that you see there. You're going to need a soldering station, and more than like a $5 or $10 one that's a little bit more accurate with temperature, which you should set to around 300 to 350 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit is a little bit less than double that. You're going to need one that has a fine tip. Because if the tip isn't fine enough, you're not going to get in there and be able to do this properly. You're going to need, of course, solder or solder, depending on which part of the world you're watching this from. Solder for the US, I'm just going to stick to that for now. And you're going to need tools to desolder it also. So when you remove a piece of electronic component, you want to get the fluid solder that is attached to it off. And there's two ways to do that. One is with one of these desoldering suction pumps. You click it in, you push it, and it's like a little vacuum cleaner and it sucks out the solder. Super useful to have. And then the other thing, and this is something new that I personally wasn't aware of, but I got for this repair, is desoldering wick. It's like a piece of, like a braid, where are we here? It's like a braid of copper. And when you touch liquid solder with it, it sucks it up. So I'm going to be using a combination of these two things. Then I have flux, which is, well, stay with me here. Flux, which is used to make sure that the oxide that's present on parts is removed. It kind of burns up and then removes the oxide so that the contacts that we make with the new faders, etc., work properly. And then we need some isopropyl alcohol. What's a proper way that you can read this? Here we go. And some Q-tips that, in case the flux leaves traces on the motherboard, I'm going to be calling it, of this device, that we can get it off. I have a little cutter here just in case, always practical to have. And that's it. That's what we're going to be working with today. So first steps, how do you take apart this device? There is a bunch of screws in the back here. None of them are behind this little feet or the stickers, which sometimes manufacturers do. So you just remove these screws and you can actually leave them in the holes. Once you've done that, you know what, sorry, let me rewind there a little bit. You should start off by pulling off all these fader caps and rotary knob encoders. If you pull a little bit firmly with feeling, they come off, you see? So start with that, remove all the fader caps and all the rotary encoders, because below the rotary encoders are screws and washers that are holding down that encoder. Let me hold this up to the camera a bit. You see there's like a screw and a washer there. You need to open those before this thing will come apart. So pull all those off, flip it over, open all the screws, and then the back of the device pops off pretty smoothly. So I'm gonna now put this away because I already have a second unit, which is my older APC, which is already open, because that's the first one that I want to fix. The other one has its own issues, but I'm going to start with this one that's actually been around with me already a long time. So when you pull this thing, when you pull the back off of it, you're going to see screws on a lot of points on the back. You see that? There's even like a little screw icon next to it. So you're going to see those screws. Of course, you need to open all of them. And if you want to totally take it apart, you're going to need also to remove these 3 screws here, because below this little secondary board, there's further screws. Now this is the first bit. If you're only having issues with buttons not launching scenes and stuff like that on your APC, it's a super easy fix. Below this secondary board there are like little electrical cables, and these over the years wear out and start to make short circuits with the back of the motherboard, and that's what causes that issue. So what you can do is to insulate this. Actually, you only really need to do the bottom of this cable that touches the motherboard, and then you should be good to go again. I ended up doing mine with gaffer tape because I was on a gig and that's the only thing I had with me. So I had to take it apart. It stopped working just before the gig, which was a whole different story. And I kind of regret now that I used gaffer tape, because obviously it holds the universe together and it sticks like hell. And I'm not ever going to be able to remove this gaffer tape. And unfortunately, these little cables are end of life. You can't buy them anymore, at least not from InMusic. So InMusic, actually, if you're seeing this video, please bring back the AKAI APC 40 Mark II. We need it. The APC 64 is nowhere near the functionality that you need to really play live with this stuff. So please, 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 with sugar on top, please bring that device back, or do an MKII, because otherwise I'm sure we're going to be starting a petition for the company with a B to do it. Okay, so if you insulate these little cables, then if you're having that erratic button behavior, it should work. Just get some electrical tape that doesn't like bond with whatever you stick it to, insulate the part that touches the bottom of the motherboard, and you should be good to go. That'll take care of that. Now, if like me, you're also having issues with faders and crossfaders, that they're not working properly, then things get a little bit more dicey. So let me show you what basically we're going to be doing today. By the way, when you take this out, be careful, because there are little plastic thingies in there like this that guide the light from the board to little red lights that you know are on the top of your APC. So don't lose those when you take that apart. So let's have a quick look here at the actual APC. As you can see here, this is what we're working with, and in this case I know that fader 8 is buggy. It has a problem. Everything else is working cool on this device, but 8, if I move it around, it kind of jumps. It doesn't go all the way to +6, all kinds of issues. And here's the first thing, and this is the good thing that I bought original parts. The faders have a little labeling on the side here. There's like some black text. Let's see if I can get this in here so maybe you can see it a bit. There's some black text on the side of the faders, and the replacement has the same. I will measure this just to be safe, but I know pretty much 99% sure that if I drop this fader in with the black text on the same position, it will work properly and not like an inverted console, the way the consoles initially were built in the 50s, that the faders were actually loudest when they were pulled closest to you, which is an interesting mixed philosophy actually. Okay, so this fader needs to come out, and the way that this works, I'm going to put it this way so that it's closer to you, that it's better to see. And I am actually now going to also zoom this in so you can see a bit better what's happening. I need to count, obviously, which is the one. So 1, 2, 3, these little 4 dots with the 2 dots and 2 dots in the middle, that's exactly what is present on the fader roll. So you see, there's like 2 dots there, 4 dots there, 2 in the middle. So actually this is the way that it should be. There we go. Actually the faders only fit in one way, so that takes care of the part. I've just realized of the concern of which is the right way to put them in, because there's 2 dots at the top, there's 2 legs at the top. See if I'm holding this correctly for the light for you to see it. There's 4 legs at the bottom, 4 holes at the bottom of the motherboard, and then these 2 in the middle here, which are the 2 little dots you see there. So I'm going to have to desolder those points on the fader that I want to replace, drop this in, solder it back in, and then we should be good to go, because I was able to get the original parts. I'm not concerned that something's not going to work as long as I don't mess up the motherboard. If I overheat this, if I do a short circuit, if I scratch any of these electronics here, or overheat this, or maybe if I'm charged because I'm wearing a fleece, like a synthetic sweater, all that stuff I would not recommend you to do. If I was being really careful, I would earth myself, normally speaking, to something, but I know that I'm not static if I'm wearing natural materials here, and if I'm basically, not rubbing anything static around. So The most dangerous thing that can really happen is that you mess up the contact that this is connected to the motherboard with by overheating it, by rubbing it off, by ripping it off. That's like the biggest danger, as long as you don't mechanically scratch any of this stuff. I've done all this stuff in the past because I kind of taught myself soldering when I was like 9 or 10. My stepfather actually had a music store, and I would just go in the back and mess with his station where people would repair stuff. And yeah, through a couple of burns and just messing with all this stuff, I kind of taught myself to do it. So I've messed up some electronics in my life, and now I know a little bit more what to watch out for. So we're going to start out by switching on, or actually plugging in. Bear with. All right, here we go. By switching on the soldering station, and I'm going to put the temperature to about 315, which is a good place to start. I have a little plastic tray here, which I would very much recommend you do, where I've put all the screws that I've removed from the motherboard in the position roughly that they were, but I noticed they're all pretty much the same size with 1 or 2 exceptions only. So I'm not too concerned about finding the right holes once I put this back together. If you want to be super safe about this, the normal way to do it is to just draw it on a piece of paper and then put the screws, or even sellotape the screws to that little piece of paper, then nothing can go wrong. Okay, so just to show you while the soldering iron heats up, this is what the crossfaders look like. They're actually black. They say alpha on the side. Let's see if I can show you this. I need to show it on the head because of the way I've mirrored this. You see? It says alpha. Yeah, they're wider, they're black. I actually was able to order a couple of these also. I have a few backups because my other one, APC 40 Mark II, the one that I'm using now, has a dodgy crossfader. So if this all goes well, then that's the next thing that I will desolder and put in. And yeah, as I said, I'm not sure if I said that before, I'm going to put the part numbers in the description of this video so that if you want to go for it, actually I'll put all the stuff that I bought on Amazon, etc., to be able to do this desoldering. I'll put it in the description so that you have easy access to this stuff. It took me a little while to find all this at a reasonable price point. Cool, so the soldering iron is warming up. A very important thing when we're soldering is we need to keep the soldering tip as clean as possible, because if it's dirty, it causes a bad contact. That's the little spongy thing that your soldering iron should come with if you're using a reasonable one. Don't get like a $5 soldering iron, try to do this with that, because the chances that it won't be hot enough or it'll be too hot are really high. It's worth having a good tool for that, and a good soldering station is like 20 bucks. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of water on this. I do have also some tissue here to be able to clean stuff off with. I have this isopropyl alcohol that at this point I'm going to put on the floor. I don't want that anywhere close to the soldering station. Always be careful when you're doing this kind of stuff. I'm actually going to get my glasses so I can A, see sharper, and B, so my eyes are protected, because since I put a nail in the wall here that jumped onto my glasses, I'm super careful with this stuff now. Thank God I was wearing my glasses that day. So I'm going to press pause here for a sec, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, I'm back. Glasses are there, so eyes protected. Good, definitely always protect your eyes. If you're doing any of this kind of stuff, please, please, please. I know enough from experience that, yeah, an accident is really likely or easy to happen if you're just like messing around with stuff. And I also wetted this little sponge so that it's easy to clean the soldering iron. Let's have a look at what the tip is like. So what I've just realized, it's a bit wobbly, which means I need to tighten it. Give me a second. Okay, so here is my soldering iron. It comes with a little replaceable, well, as most of them do, a little replaceable head, which right now is loose. So I'm just tightening it so that it doesn't fall on the motherboard of the APC and wreak all kinds of havoc. Okay, so here we go. That's my tip of my soldering iron, so I need to kind of figure out where I am here. There we go. So as you see, you need one that is fine, like for electronics. If you have like a really rough one, that's not gonna do the job properly. So you know, that's kind of what you're looking for. The tip looks reasonably clean, but I'm gonna pass it through this for a bit, just to scruff off a bit of the roughness that it has. And now what I'm gonna do is grab this soldering iron. I'm going to use this little bit of tissue that I have here, and I'm going to just put a bit of solder on it, because that will help to clean it a bit. I don't want the first solder that I put on there after it hasn't been used for a while to end up on the board here. And I want to see if the temperature is hot enough. As you can see, it's melting right away. I'm putting the solder on here now. Good. So I'm just going to remove that and checking that the tip is clean. Looks good. So now it's really like the way you want your soldering tip to look when you're starting to solder. Let me see if I can get my camera to focus on this. Can I get it? Here we go. See? Nice and silver, nice and clean. Having burned myself dozens of times with the soldering iron, I keep well away from it now. Okay, cool. So, main thing that can go wrong when you're doing this kinds of electronic stuff is that you take out the wrong part. Also been there, done that. So I want to be 100% sure that I am working on the right fader. Now, this is the crossfader. I can tell from the way that it's horizontal. This is the master fader. This should be fader 8. I made a mental note to be 100% sure that fader 8 is the one that I need to be replacing on this device. So here we go. I'm going to grab this desoldering pump, lock it in, and I'm going to grab the smallest desoldering wick that I bought, which was 2 millimeters. I know that there's 2 of these on there. So this is the desoldering wick that I was telling you about, which is something new to me. Actually, I haven't worked with it before, so I'm curious how that works. I have the feeling this will likely be the perfect stuff to get rid of the final little bits that maybe the desoldering pump doesn't take off the motherboard. So this kind of like a wick, yeah, it sucks off the solder rests that may be there. So here we go. I have the solder nice and warmed up. I have my soldering pump charged. I'm going to just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is fader 8. That is that's master fader, crossfader. So I know I need to desolder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points on the back here. I'm going to start with these big ones because, yeah, let's start with something easy. I'm going to put a little bit of solder onto the tip of this because that's going to actually help the old solder that's there to get fluid and be removable. So far, it's not budging, which could be that my soldering iron is still not quite hot enough. I'm going to give it a little bit more juice. Right now I am at 325. I'm going to put a little bit more solder again, just to have a little bit of fluid there. Just double checking I'm working on the right fader, and give it another shot. This is the nerve-wracking bit when it's not really doing what I would like it to do. Problem with if you heat the components on a board like this for too long is that it can of course do damage. So, you know, we want to keep the contact between these things as short as possible. Aha, I felt it go in a little, which means it's starting to flow. There you go. You saw how this sucked out the solder, and now there's like, yeah, like a bunch of the fluid solder went out. I just charged it again and a bunch of solder fell out. That was not very professional, but it looks like it didn't do any damage. Note to myself, charge it again somewhere not over the board that you're trying to fix to cause more damage. I'm going to put again a little bit of solder on here just to make it easier for it to flow in, and keep working on cleaning this because this can still actually be cleaner and less solder residue present. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to eject this now somewhere else. So yeah, it's doing a good job getting rid of the solder that was on the board there. So that one's looking pretty reasonable. Now I'm going to try to use this desoldering wick to get rid of the last little bits that I think are still here. The wick is copper, so it conducts heat and electricity, of course, very, very well. I don't want to burn my fingers. This looks pretty clean already. I don't see the wick doing a massive amount right now. I did a little bit. Okay, cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. Moving on. Again, just a little bit of solder on it. Good practice is not to put the solder onto your soldering iron directly over the circuit you're working on. Do it on the side, so there's no chance that it can fall on the circuit and cause damage. So again, I have a little bit of solder on this. I'm touching the part that I want to take out, waiting for that solder that's present there to become fluid. It's fluid. There we go. Took it out with the desoldering pump. Okay, pumping the pump away from the board this time. So let me show you, this is the, obviously, solder. This is the stuff that's coming out of the desoldering pump. And obviously you don't want that molten stuff in any kind of way to end up somewhere across your circuit board. So I'm charging it away from the parts. Again, a little bit of solder on the tip. I'm going to do that just off screen because I don't want to do it directly over the board. This shouldn't drop on there. And now we're getting to the dicier stuff, which are these tiny ones here. So let's see. There we go. That's melted. I could feel it. Cool. Yeah, desoldering pump for this kind of work is absolutely essential. You would not get far without one. It's very, very hard to remove that solder if it's that piece, if the solder is actually still present there. So moving on to the next contact here. Go. That crunchy, funky little sound. And tell it's fluid. Most of that seems to have come off. I'm just going to do it one more time. Just using a very little drop of solder here to bond with the existing solder to transfer the heat better. Okay, cool. It looks pretty good. It does look like it's still stuck a bit in there, but I'll wiggle around with that. Okay, now we're going to the ones that I'm a little bit cautious of, which are these tiny 4 at the bottom there. Those are the ones that, yeah, look like they're going to be actually specifically tricky also to solder back on. But yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So here we go. Little contact number 1 of that fader. Looks to me like it could use a little bit more heat. I'm going to go up to 350. Hopefully reduce the amount of time that I spent heating that part. I'm not worried about that 350. Let me go to 340. Okay. Okay. There we go. Next one. God, it's pretty tiny in there. Okay, that still looks a bit soldered. And going to this one on the outside. Honestly, knowing how much work this is now and how fidgety it is, I probably should have taken this to an electronics shop and have them do it. But I live out in the countryside now. I don't even know if there is a shop nearby that does this in the next major city. And I like the idea of being able to fix my own stuff. But there's always the risk that you ruin it, right? That does happen. So I guess that's the thing. That if this was my only APC, I probably wouldn't be doing this myself, because the downsides of it breaking wouldn't be worth the pleasure of having done it yourself, and the downside, yeah, then maybe having saved a little bit of money. Okay. So this is the last contact point from what I can see here. This one is really tricky to get to. I'm gonna depump it and see where we're at with this now. There still does seem to be quite a bit, so I'm gonna try again with this desoldering wick to hopefully that will suck up a bit of the leftover solder here. As you see, right now I am causing a short circuit between those, but obviously if I remove that before I put it back together, it's okay. I'm just doing this while I remove the solder. I'm just heating it up as much as I can without hopefully risking any damage to the board. And removing the solder. And so it's making progress here. The desoldering wick so far has not convinced me. Maybe I'm using it wrong. Maybe I should have seen a video also on that, because I actually haven't used that stuff before, but it's not really sucking in the solder the way I would have thought it did, but the suction pump is pretty reliable. It's doing a good job. Okay, those points are starting to look really good. So what we want is a wire sticking through a hole and no solder flying around it, right? That's like then you know it's going to be easy to pull out. Still a little bit left there. But we're getting there. Yeah, this stuff takes time. My plan originally was to change all 8 faders to do preventative maintenance, but after this, I'm like not too sure. No, definitely not going to do that. I'm just going to do this one today and get back to making music. But since I know that there are a lot of these out in the field and there's not that much content on how to fix these, I thought this could be really interesting for other people also. Okay, maybe I should set up an APC Mark II 40 Mark II repair service. Send me your units to Portugal. No. Okay. Don't send me your units. I was kidding. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me now. Let me just check these big ones. I think could be a little bit cleaner. Okay, I'm going to clean my soldering iron off and let's have a look how this is looking. I'm going to remove these little bits of solder here from the workspace because I don't want these anywhere near to the device. Okay, how is this fader looking? Does that look like it's ready to come out? Looks pretty close. I wish I could take off this motherboard. I don't like it clanking around there. I'm gonna do a little fix here, bear with me. Alright, I've just put a little bit of tissue here so it's not like clanking and scratching around the traces that are above it while it's not connected. So this is the fader in question, number 8. One side is coming off actually, the top side, but the bottom ones are still closed. So we're getting there, All right, let's keep going here. So a little bit more. here. So the top is loose, the bottom is still stuck. And actually, yeah, I can see it from here. There's still quite a bit of solder on these points. Maybe it's actually just that one also. So heating again, going around. Perhaps I can charge the desoldering tool. So yeah, a little bit of a painstaking process. I guess this can be like a little, I may just fast forward this stuff, these little steps in between to make this video a little bit shorter if possible. Okay, and the little faders down below, besides the very right one, I guess left on your end of the table, all the other ones look really clean. It's just this one that looks like it may still have some solder holding it in place. Maybe I can clean this one up a little better. Okay, clean my soldering iron, clean my pump. Let's see if that's loosened it. Top is all free, but the bottom ones are still stuck. Tricky, tricky. All right, I'm going to pause the video here and keep working on this until I remove the last little bits of solder. It's just a repetitive process, and then we'll continue here when I take this fader out. Okay, attempt number, what is it, 2, 3? Trying to see now if this is loose to the point where it will detach. Motherboard, not. Tricky. Yeah, the top ones are cool. This one in the middle doesn't even look loose enough. All right, keep going. So what I'm doing now is I'm using a screwdriver just to move that little pin in the middle a bit so that I can see whether or not it's loose or not. And right now it is still a little bit of solder on it. Oh, keep going here. Okay, that now I can really see the hole that it kind of goes through. So with this one, I think I can take my screwdriver, which was flying around here, and I'm just going to move it a little bit while it's hot so that it's in the hole and not like still stuck on a little tiny bit of solder at its edge maybe. This is why it's really good to have screwdrivers that are the right size and not too big. And yeah, with this kind of stuff, you have to be super careful that you don't, how to call this, like miss and end up scratching the motherboard. That would suck. Okay, so I'm pretty sure now that that also is loose. But yeah, the little guys at the bottom, not too sure about those yet. Let's see. Okay, cool. I can feel that the bottom ones, 3 are loose, 1 is still stuck. That one potentially also. So I'm going to heat up the one that I can feel is still stuck. I didn't have 3 coffees today. And try to push that through a bit. But yeah, it's a sign that it still has solder, right? So I need to keep desoldering here a bit. I'm doing here on the angles. Can you guys still see what's going on here? Yeah, cool. Okay. Gonna use a little bit of solder on the tip again to get this to flow a bit better. Just a little bit. Helps the solder that's in the joint to get the heat better and go liquid fully. Come on. It also has a different color, it's kind of black. Being super cooperative, yes, I gotta be a bit patient here.
Not to be hypnotized by the forms of speech and images that we have for the world, not to be hypnotized by them into thinking that that
Let's see
is
where
the
we're
way
at with
the
this
world
guy.
really is.
So, these ones I can tell they're moving. So you see, all of those are loose. That one is fighting me. Okay, alright, come on. Bit more solder on the tip. It seems to be it's on this side that it's okay. Channel, which is like Right to Repair. I forget his name, but there's a guy that does this with computer motherboards. Respect to you, my friend. I can't believe you're able to do this with those micro tiny parts. He does it on like magnifying glasses and stuff, because otherwise you can't see anything. Yeah, hard enough on this kind of consumer grade electronic stuff, in my opinion. All right, come on, work with me here. Yes. Yes, 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 it moved. Okay, cool. I think we're in business. Okay, let me just flip this over a bit. Yes, there we go. So, fader 8. That's it. That is the piece that we needed to get off there. And as you can see, the way that this fader is, there's no question of which is the right way in, because it would only fit a certain one way, so that's cool. But this is the broken one. I'm going to put this far, far away so that I definitely don't end up putting the broken one back in. Going back to the board. And now, of course, what I do want to do is get this contact points here as clean as possible, because any solder remains. I'm just going to come closer to you for this so I can actually see it myself on the screen that's running in the back also. Come on, camera, focus, you can do it. Here we go. So any solder that gets left in that joint is going to potentially lead to a short circuit down the road between those tiny, tiny little connectors. You see that? So I got to try to clean that up as best I can. And for that, I'm going to be flipping this over so it's closer to me so that I can work a little bit better on it. Yeah, actually you can still see well. Cool. Okay, and actually at this point, I think having this desoldering wick do what it's supposed to do would be super cool. So I'm going to Google very quickly how those things work, and I will be right back. All right, I watched a YouTube video, what else? And I was using it wrong. So this needs to go basically on the connectors that I want to remove the solder from. And I'm just going to squeeze it on there with the soldering iron, and then the wick will get hot and it should pull the leftover solder right into the wick. And in case it doesn't do that, I may need to use a little bit of flux. See? It's got a tiny, tiny little bit on it. Some of this method doesn't convince me that much. I'm really heating up the motherboard here, which I really want to avoid. So I'm going to go back to the pump and just get these as clean as I can, especially these tiny, tiny, tiny little ones down here. Just want to make sure that I'm removing as much solder as I can from these contact points. And the worst thing, like worst case scenario, is that you somehow damage this contact point on the motherboard so that it's not possible to get an electrical connection anymore. So here we have to be super careful. And little bits of solder get stuck in the suction pump. It's actually quite interesting. Anyway, it's doing its thing still. So on to the next. Yeah, I could sort this fault the solder with fluid right away. So I think the temperature is quite good now. What am I on? 350 degrees Celsius. Okay, those look really nice now, except the very first still has a little bit of excess solder, or solder, as some like to call it. Okay, that looks really good now. That looks clean. The other points already look really good. Cool, all right. So cleaning off my soldering iron again. Yeah, I'm not sure about this stuff. If you have great tips for how to use this, then let me know in the comments, because it's barely got any solder on it. I don't know. I may be still doing something wrong with it. Live and learn. Okay, cool. So here is their replacement fader. As you can see, it has 4 pins in the bottom, 2 pins in the top, so there's only one way it can fit in here. And what I'm going to do is try to place this. Well, I'm not going to be able to do this blind, so I'm just going to rotate this and stick this through there. Cool, that was pretty easy. Okay, so now the pins are again pointing out from where they should be. I'm going to place a little plastic desoldering wick stack under it, so it's definitely pushed through the board as best as it can be. And now comes the pièce de résistance, or the important moment, which is soldering back, soldering this back on properly. So what I'm going to do is grab a tiniest little bit of flux with my super tiny micro screwdriver. So flux is like this weird brown stuff here that is used to remove oxide from electrical connections. And I'm just going to place just a very, very little bit of flux on these things, so that hopefully it's not going to make big flux stains across the motherboard that then I'm going to have to clean off afterwards. A bit more generous with it. I mean, the videos I've been seeing online, people just pile this stuff on there, but like looking at all those traces over there, I don't want anything on those traces if I can avoid it. And this is the ones that have me most concerned, because they are tiny, tiny, tiny. More of this stuff. Yeah, what this flux does in essence is it removes corrosion that is present on any metal on the surface, so that the soldering goop, what do you call this stuff, the solder, can actually flow through it well. Of course, if it makes it flow like hell, it's going to spread out all across those points, right? So I really want like the bare minimum here. So I'm going to clean these already, not wrong ones. I'm going to clean this already proactively, so it's just like the barest minimum amount possible that can be on these, to hopefully do its job without spreading everywhere. Cool. All right, I'm going to start again now with the bigger ones, because that'll get me some practice. I'm going to lower the temperature just a little bit, back to like 315, to be able to control this a little bit better. And here we go. So the way to do this is to touch the piece that you want to solder to, warm that up, and then introduce the solder, so that it just kind of flows across the piece. When I started doing this in my childhood, I always would just melt the solder onto the tip of the soldering iron and then kind of from there spread it on there, but that's not really the way to do it. Okay, there. So the soldered flux did its job. I could see that it pulled it across really nicely. I put the tiniest bit on there. So it's like the absolute bare minimum now. And that's actually really great, because that's the one that has tons of traces right next to it going to this microprocessor. On to the next one. I could see the flux is melting there now. And this whole job, it requires a bit of patience. Again, really nice little one. Didn't go over very much. Brings my hope up for the tiny ones that I'm going to be doing after this. Just the tiniest bit. I'm going to put a little bit more. Actually, that looked already like it made a nice connection. Put a little bit more because it's still... there we go. That's perfect. Okay, here we go on this one. And I think it's good I lowered the temperature a bit. 315. What am I on now? Yeah, like 315 for resoldering. I think I can recommend it to you, because 350 now would have made this all go very, very quickly. Okay, this is the trickiest bit. So that's not happening. I'm gonna clean my soldering iron. I'm gonna put a little bit more flux on there because I wanted to just flow across these nicely the way it did just before. On the bigger points, I think I may have skimmed a little bit too much on the flux on these tiny ones. So I'm gonna put my soldering iron there. I'm gonna be putting my soldering iron there. I'm going to be putting my soldering iron down here. Wish I'd brought my helping hands, which is like a little clamp that has a magnifying glass also on it. That would have made this a bit easier, but with my glasses on, I can kind of see it, so here we go. Zoom in here a bit for dramatic effect, but actually so that you can just see better also what's happening. Okay, cool. There we go. That just flew across nicely, and it's like barely any solder on it, so that's perfect. I'm quite happy with that first one. Second. Second one the same. It's on the edge of that third one. Jesus, that's gonna be tight. That's gonna be tight. Apparently only 2 of these are used, so let's see. I'm just gonna keep going here and hope that... I'm just gonna clean my soldering iron and hope that this is not gonna be a short circuit and a useless fader for until I... Okay, that one seems to have flown quite nicely. Okay, that's it. So as you can see, I'm using just the tiniest bit of solder. I'm switching this off now here because what I absolutely don't want to happen is that there's a soldering contact between these 4 little points. So let me hold this up to the camera to be able to see better how good a job I've done. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Come on. The Olympus. Here we go. Yes, I guess on a 4K TV it's going to be better to see because from where I'm sitting, this is tricky. But I think from everything I can see, it looks good. So I'm going to grab a magnifying glass and look at this a bit closer up. But I think it looks like I'm happy, and then I'm going to show you the rebuilding it back together process. Okay, so looking at it through a magnifying glass, which I'm sure I'm not going to be able to get to work on camera. It looks like there's just the tiniest airspace between these 2 joints here that have me a little concerned because they look very close together, and I see that that one actually doesn't have enough solder yet. It's kind of floating there. There is a bit of solder there, but not enough that I'm really happy with. In case you don't know these, if you're ever soldering cables or plugs, like if you build your own cables, if you have the time for that, which is kind of a nice meditative thing to do. I used to do it. These are helping hands, which you can strap a magnifying glass or also like cables and stuff into these little clamps so that it's easier to solder stuff. I could have used it actually here for the looking at of what it is that I was doing there in a bit more detail. So actually, while I'm saying that and while my soldering iron is warming up, I am going to set this thing up so that I can use it and see a little bit more what I'm doing, because even with my glasses on, it's tough to see. It's tiny, this stuff. But I mean, yeah, compared to computer motherboards, it's huge. Those people work under microscopes. But for my soldering and eyes, my soldering skills and my eyes, this stuff is really small. Okay, here we go, here we go. I should have bought a slightly more high-grade pair of helping hands, because these things always fall apart when I'm trying to use them. It's a very funny system, how it's done. It's not the most elegant system, having these little things that are just floating around until you put pressure on them. But anyway, it works. It's just a little bit of aggro once to get it locked in, but once it's locked in, it does its thing. So yeah, as you can see, this kind of just grabs onto both sides of little balls on that magnifying glass and the foot. And from there on in, you can move it around. So here we go. Checking out my reasonably okay soldering work, actually, considering it's the first time that I'm soldering something this small. Yeah, this seems to be just the tiniest air gap. So what I almost messed up here, and what you need to be please super careful for, is if you use too much solder on something this small, it'll just flow into one big short circuit. And looking at it here, it looks like I got lucky, because there's still a tiny air gap between the first and second. But it's like, it's very, very small. So it's at the edge of what will still work without a short circuit. Now, I read that someone destroyed one of these contacts, and apparently the crossfader only uses 2 of these tracks. And seeing as the tracks that are sort of in a direct line above, I would assume it's using tracks 1 and 3 only, and 2 and 4 are like redundant. So even if these 2 here were to short circuit, I think probably it's not a problem. I can't actually see which tracks are being used here, but that's just my assumption right now. Anyways, what I wanted to do now is add a little bit of flux of solder to the very first one there, because that has just a little bit too little. It can have a tad more. So again, I'm just going to use a bit of flux, just a very, very little bit, to make that process hopefully flow a bit better. And so far, actually, I've not had a ton of flux flowing over the motherboard, so that I'm very happy with. So now with my helping hands magnifying glass here, does make things a bit easier. Warming up this part. Bring in the solder. I should definitely have done this with the magnifying glass from the start. But I'm a bit less guesswork. Looks good. It's definitely not flowing over. I can see solder on it, so I'm happy with that. I don't want to keep adding more and end up with a second joint that I'm going to have to potentially disassemble again in order to get this to work. Cool. All right, so that was it. Now is time to put this back together. Am I forgetting anything here with this fader? No, looks good. So I'm just going to remove some of this stuff, and now we're going to the more, I guess you could call it a bit more fun part of sticking this thing back together. Something that happened that was a little bit unnerving is that, yeah, like 3 tiny little glass things fell out here which pass on the light, as I showed you at the beginning, to the buttons at the top here, and I gotta suss out how these work, how that fits together. I'm gonna pause here while I have a look at that. Okay, so that wasn't too hard. Let me see if I can show you this on the motherboard. You see these little tiny things on the motherboard right there in the corner? Those are actually LEDs. They're like little lamps that light up. So that's passing the light to the record buttons, and well, actually, getting these things to be in the right place again, I realize now is pretty simple. This is the back of it, and these are the front of it. What am I saying? These are the holes that it's passing that light through, and actually they fit in like that really easily. You see, it's pretty straightforward. These things go in there, and then that little plastic tube passes the light up to that thing showing you if something is in record mode or not. So the way, of course, we put this together is the reverse of how I disassembled it. So this goes up here. I'm just going to remove bits of solder still that are flying around here. And then faders are at the bottom. Cool. So I know now that this drops in just like that. So let's see if anything is not quite. Of course, we have little rubbery buttons here that have to find their correct place into the back of this. So you see they're still all crooked. Zoom out a little bit here so I can show you this a bit better. There we go. So you see the gummy buttons here are still crooked, which is why this isn't going in nicely. Now they're straight. Everything looks straight. Yes. Cool, that's good. Okay. So what I'm going to do first to make my life a bit easier is to immediately screw down at least 2 spots on this so that it'll hold it in place while I'm messing with it. And once I have the rubbery buttons in their correct place again. Hello, here we go. I should have gaffer taped that motherboard down. So you see, rubbery buttons are all in their place, which means I can tighten down one of these screws. Just keep them there. And yeah, always be super careful when you're tightening screws like this on your motherboards, because if your screwdriver flies out of your hand, it will definitely cause damage to the motherboard if it hits some of the spots, the tracks on the motherboard. Okay, then this one here. Okay, that should be good. And I'm just gonna grab one more for good measure. Put it around here. Okay, cool. So now these screws are holding the motherboard roughly in place. And now I remember also why I had these big screwdrivers. These screws actually work better with a larger screwdriver. So I'm going to really tighten these down now. And I think actually, if I'm remembering correctly, this one right in the middle here was the one screwdriver that had a washer on it to, I guess, improve the electrical contact, or for some reason. In any case, it has a big circle around it, and from what I remember, this was the... Well, that washer is actually plastic. Okay, that's a bit disheartening. It's not what I thought, so I think I'm wrong about that. I did video the places that the screws came out of, but I seem to remember it was more on this part of the board. And why it would have plastic is because this is the only screw that is actually going over tracks on the motherboard, and you wouldn't want this screw to damage those tracks. So that makes sense. I'm not going to tighten this too hardcore. And all the other ones, as you can see, they have like some kind of an earthing point. There's copper behind them, so there would be the ones that would not benefit from any kind of a plastic screw. All right, so here we go. Now we're looking here on these angles. I guess if this is 4K, so you should be able to see everything well enough. Anyway, this bit is very straightforward. I don't think it's going to pose a challenge to anyone that's taken apart some bit of their studio or some electrical component before. This is pretty straightforward. I wonder who's I and H. I wonder if that's part of the quality control. Wonder if that is someone's initials that checked over this device before, or that probably did the final assembly of this device. Wow, I can see the date this was made, 2014-07-10, down to the day. Can't believe that this thing is already 10 years old. That does explain why its faders have started failing. Yes, okay, going through these screws. The good thing is that I did check and I saw that all these screws are basically the same size. There was one or two that looked slightly different, and I have them on a separate part of my screw tray. So all of these going into their places now. Skip ahead in the video, maybe a minute or two if this is boring, because yeah, this is a bit repetitive. And actually, maybe to keep your interest for a sec, you see there's some other holes here? Those are the screws that actually the back wall gets screwed through to the front, and they're different because they don't have these screw points and those electrical contacts behind them. So yeah, kind of easy to keep them apart, I think. Although I may actually have messed up here and put a screw into a spot here that is reserved for the back wall. So good that we're talking about this, and if you didn't skip ahead, good for you. Because I messed up, that's not a place where one of these screws should be. Okay, cool. So now coming to this part of the motherboard, which, yeah, I shared with you exactly. That's the spot where this two remaining screws should go. You see, they also have that little electrical contact below them, and they're labeled with a little screw next to it, as in put a screw here. And yeah, these don't tighten them like you would tighten some, I don't know, a piece of wood. Just as they call it, hand tighten it, just so that it's just tight and it's not going to fall off. But it doesn't need to have force applied to it, because you can actually snap a motherboard like this in half pretty easily if you put too much pressure on them. And now I have 3 screws left, and I have 3 holes marked with a screw left, and these are the ones I kept separate because they looked slightly shorter. Yeah, just very, very, very little bit of pressure. Probably in 2 weeks my crossfader is going to go on this one also, and I'm going to have wished that I'd done that at the same time. But yeah, preventative maintenance is something that I shy away from, since I destroyed a Saab that I used to own by trying to fix it up a lot, and then the whole thing just went to shit. So since those days I don't do that anymore. It upsets the balance of a device if you start changing a whole bunch of stuff, is my takeaway from that. Okay. Cool, so as you saw, that was pretty easy to screw all in together. These are the weak point of this device. It's such a shame that these pieces are not available anymore, but it is what it is. Let's flip it over. And this is the point where you usually realize some piece is not sticking through correctly, but it looks good. Just gonna do a quick check that all the faders are mobile, that all the rotaries are mobile without it scratching anywhere, which feels good. Cool, everything's mobile and ready. And now comes the bit which is putting these washers over the rotaries. With these 8, I'm 100% sure that they had washers on them, and actually I can see the way they're threaded and everything. They had the washers and a nut, as did these ones at the top here. Yeah, some parts are still finding their spot. So I have 1 washer left, which would probably then be the, no, sorry, not the tempo knob. I think the tempo knob is a different one. It's like a clicked encoder. It's for the Q, the master out. Cool. Let me get light slightly closer in on this. There we go. Now you can see better. Okay, so then now these washers go over each of these spots, and yeah, just finger tighten them first, and then the last little bit do it with with a piece like a plier or whatever you prefer to use for just tightening. I'm keeping it very basic. I'm just using this thing here without a lot of pressure to tighten this. So I'm going to pause here and just tighten these washers and little nuts, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is the last one. I'm just using this clamping on it. I'm just tightening it enough so that it's fixed. It's not going to pop off somewhere. And that's that now. Now I can go back to my little knob tray and yeah, just drop those in on top and reassemble this side of the controller. This is actually really easy. Just find the spot where it fits on the shaft, push it down a little bit, all quite gentle. They're all the same actually, so you can't really do anything wrong here. If you're having trouble that your crossfader or your fader caps, don't leave me, your fader caps are kind of flying off when you're packing it up and stuff, what I usually do is just put some white tack, or blue tack it's called in some places, and just use that to like do kind of a soft sticky surface that this can attach to without it becoming permanently glued, because if you glue this thing and one of your faders breaks, you're shit out of luck. It's going to be really hard to get that fader out. So yeah, I'm just realizing as I'm doing this how much I'm babying this thing. I guess it's cool to fix stuff up. I just saw the crossfader is the one that doesn't have a line. But honestly, if this thing wasn't so unobtainium, I would just have bought a different one and sold this as defective or something. So it's cool, it's nice. It's a nice project to fix stuff up. And it's always, if it doesn't just like flash and burn up when you switch it back on, it's always a really nice feeling. When you've put something that was broken back together, you understand it better. And it's nice to share the knowledge and experience with you, right? So here you go. As you see, I've kept the screws in the holes that they were in. And actually, yeah, if I just remove this now, you'll see that those screw spots match up. For example, there, right? That's the holes that the screws from the outer case go through. So here we go. I think for this one I was also using a slightly bigger screwdriver. I have kind of a medium size one that fits better. Always try to use a screwdriver that fits the head that you're screwing into really well, because it's really easy to strip a screw if you're using a screwdriver that doesn't fit well. Like, see how it was jumping there? I'm not happy with how that one's grabbing it, so I'm going to try the thicker one. And I seem to remember, yeah, the thicker screw. What is this? Come on, this is a German thing. I'm sure it has a marking. PH2 times 100. That one fits perfectly. And there we go. There we go. If you need to get yourself a good set of screws, these are by a company called Connex. Yeah, Connex. Yeah, that's actually a tool set my brother bought me also. Thank you, Vince. Which are, yeah, he bought me like some quality tools, because I was always messing around with like some cheapo tools I picked up in a gas station or something, and he sorted me out and yeah, bought me a bunch of basic tools in a reasonable or very good quality that I'm super happy with now, because it makes a difference if you're working on stuff that your screwdriver doesn't fall apart halfway through or kind of barely fit the parts that you're trying to screw in. So yeah, reasonable quality tools is definitely a good investment. Yeah, so I'll put links to the stuff here that I think makes sense to have in a good quality. Like for example, this little electronics screwdriver set that I have, it's from Lux. It's not like a super expensive brand, but it's a good European brand, and it has tiny little electrical screwdrivers that I've used a ton for anything to do with gear in the studio that I'm fixing. So I'll put a link to that one, because that's a really good little kit to have, so that you always have a fitting screwdriver when you're taking apart electronics. Like I said, if your screw flies out of the screw that you're screwing and it's like goes across the motherboard and scratches those tracks, you're gonna have to bring it to a professional to like bridge those tracks with little cables. And I don't remember which device it was. I have the vague memory that maybe it was a computer. I changed the battery on a motherboard maybe, and I trashed it. My screwdriver jumped out, I scratched the motherboard, and I knew like better replace it than ask someone else to fix it, because there's no way. Okay, that was it. EU address in music in Harcourtstrasse. This is the mother company that now owns AKAI and a whole bunch of other companies, which is the last one that we're so much talking about. I just recently acquired one anyway, I can't remember. But in music, people, please, 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 bring it back. Where are we here? We need this. We need this in either an MKIII or just as it is, just bring it back. You can see how much time and effort we're spending on getting these or keeping these things operational. And depending on how many people watch this video and agree with that sentiment of that we need to get this thing back, I may actually really start an online petition for it. Cool, I'm testing the buttons, they're all working. My lovely missus has just come in. Come in, wait, I will pause. So my wonderful missus has just told me I need to drive her somewhere in 10 minutes. So cool, that gives us just enough time to smack this on the computer and see if it works. Let's go. Okay, so we're back. I have it on my desk now. Excuse the color grading, but I don't have the time right now to get into details like that. No smoke, so that's a good sign. It's synchronized, and this is fader 8. Oh yes, here, let me show you. And I don't know why this isn't in focus. Is this on manual focus? No, there we go. Let me show you on Ableton. It's working beautifully. So now I'm back to an APC where all my faders are working correctly, as is my crossfader. Fantastic. So I have a fully working device again that I can actually play to take with me to a gig that I'm playing in Albania in 2 weeks with a friend of mine, Olen, who has invited me, or actually someone that met me through Rapid Flow and has invited me to come play in Albania, that I'm super looking forward to. So this device is the one that's going to be coming with me. Yeah, thank you for hanging in with me on this video, and I hope that this has been useful for you as an APC 40 Mark II user. A lot of this applies to any kinds of electronics, but this is, I guess, pretty specific. Yeah, tell me what you thought of it in the comments. If you're a super expert soldering person, then please share your insights on stuff I could maybe do better. I'm always looking forward to learn from other people's experience. I hope you have a great time in the studio, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.